Hello, hello everyone, and welcome to a new edition of Talks by Softbinator. For a second there, I forgot that this edition will be again in English, and I almost started speaking Romanian again. We have reached the 157 edition, and as you might already know from the Facebook event, it's a special edition powered by our friends at BearingPoint Romania, who will also be the ones talking to us. So all the speakers are from BearingPoint, and they will tell us tonight how we can kickstart large enterprise applications. Tonight with us, hello, we hello have everyone, and welcome to a new
One.
edition of Talks by Softbinator. Sorry, I had a small feedback loop problem there. Fixed it. Okay, so tonight with us we have Flavia Husar, product manager at BearingPoint Romania, and also Andreea Olaru and Andrei Frasie, both of which technology consultants. As previously mentioned, the topic is kickstarting large enterprise applications, and it will be splitted into three presentations. The first one, tips and tricks on how to kickstart an application from scratch. The second one about the backend architecture and why is key into building stable and scalable applications. And the third one, the problems that pop during an application's lifecycle when it comes out of poorly thought out architectures, sharing mistakes that we can all learn from. Flavia, we will start with your presentation since you're the product manager. But before you start, please tell us a few words about you. What was your tech journey so far, and what are your passions?
Yeah, sure. If you let me, Ratu, I will also share my screen. I have also a slide for that. So
Of
if
course,
someone
of
likes
course.
visual, and it also is connected to my background. So just confirm if you can see my screen.
Yeah, all looks good now.
Good. Thanks. So nice to be here and to tell you about what we do every day, large scale enterprise applications for our clients and beyond. I'm Flavia Husar. I started as a dev, so I have a technical background, finished automatics and computer science, and also in BearingPoint. I started as a dev, then switched to UX UI, and now I work as a product manager, and I'm leading the UX UI team. So this is why I like visuals, but also tech, and I'm trying to mix it in our project. So this is about me, and maybe as a sum up, this has been my career in BearingPoint and what BearingPoint offers in terms of what you can work on tech products. I will do an intro for my colleagues. They are going to present the interesting part of what we do in terms of tech, because I know most of you are techies here and are interested in that. What we do in BearingPoint as an introduction, we do three stuff overall in terms of tech products. We do applications for our clients and their clients. So we build those applications for them with our tech teams. We do our tech IP assets. What this means is intellectual property or products
And I
that
think
are BearingPoints and that we offer to many clients, depending. Yeah.
we had a small cut of your audio there, but I think you're back to normal now.
I'm back.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Sorry, always with this. Okay. Back with IP assets. So basically, we have products of BearingPoints that we offer to multiple clients in different industries. And we also have internal apps that we build for ourselves in BearingPoint to make our lives easier with tech. I worked on all three of them in different roles. And I believe the process is the same for all of them, but with different interactions and different stakeholders. My tips and tricks on this is that you should have in your team a team that is fully independent, that has product management, development, an ideation team, business analysis, architecture, UX, UI design, and also testing. So this is one of the important things, because if you have all of this, then you have a process for your product to move forward. And for each of these subjects, my colleagues will talk more about backend and frontend, but my experience is in UX, UI, ideation, research, and analysis. And together with the team, we try and we manage on different products to do some templates or strategies to better define and kickstart projects. So we don't start from scratch. We start with something we have in terms of templates for ideation, workshops, so that we better define the requirements for tech, so that developers know exactly what they need to do. I'm still fine with audio, right?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, good. Thanks. Yeah, and this is what we discovered along the way. So working on various projects, myself and the team noticed that we can't always say, okay, we kickstart this and try another thing and so on. So we learned from our mistakes in the past. From the fact that maybe we weren't prepared for the industry or we didn't have the right templates. And now we do this so that we can prototype faster, so from the design stage, and to not get to development, to develop something that won't be okay for our users or our clients. And this offers something very important for any client, which is predictability in terms of time to market and effort to develop something. And this is the goal, and maybe to sum it up, why we try to be prepared to kickstart a project every time. Okay, and I want to tell you how we do it and what it means to work on these different types of products. So we split this division of ours, so BearingPoint Business Services, that offers this IT services, into 4 pillars. One pillar is this products pillar, and I will tell you maybe some examples of our products. Another one is our digital solution factory, which actually focuses on our components to build up other products. And this is also custom development with Node.js, Angular, or React Native on mobile, and also on SAP or the Power Apps platform from Microsoft. And also we have the support stage, which is quite important because you don't just build the product, you offer also the support for it, and you need to be aware of what can happen after you deploy this to the clients. And we also have the consulting gear, which actually is rooted in our consultancy company. We don't just put together components or offer our products, but we also offer exactly the products that our client needs, and we build them just for them, and they are tailored there. And as examples, and this is my last slide, these are very big products of ours, so products of BearingPoint. I didn't include here what we build for our clients because those are the products for that are theirs, but these are some of ours. And for example, we have the People Development Cloud, which is a learning and development platform. So it's in the HR industry, and it's a product built based on different needs that we saw also in our company or at our clients, and then we transformed it into something that can be delivered as software as a service. Then we have, for example, the ETM Next, and all of these you can find on our website. So it's BearingPoint Services. ETM is a very interesting project built on the SAP Cloud, and it's for the construction industry to manage the end-to-end process of resources in construction, and also this part with resource planning, which is quite complicated. Another example of an application is something we built last year. We built it first for ourselves because we needed it. It's the Safe app. So maybe you have heard of such applications. It's managing the whole return to the office, so booking of places, managing who comes to the office, who not, and all of the capacity of the office. We first built it for our Paris office, and then we offered it also to our clients, and is now used by many of our clients in their offices. And Swarm, which is a new product that we are launching now, which focuses on the collection of data. So we have data gathered in a smart way to serve our clients' needs of intelligently looking at their data and getting insights. And these are some examples, and Andrea and Andrei will tell you exactly how we also built them. So that's it from my side. You can reach out at any point. You have my details here, so it's quite simple. You can also ping me on LinkedIn if you have any questions after this. And yeah, I'll hand over to Andrea to talk about our backend.
Before Andrea starts, I want to tell you all that you can ask questions on the Facebook. Just add a comment on Facebook with your question, and I will then forward it to our speakers. Thank you very much, Flavia. Andrea, you can continue now.
Okay, thank you, Radu. Thank you, Flavia. Let me share my screen. 1 second. Let me know when you can see it.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So hello everyone, my name is Andrea Olaru. I'm a technology consultant at inBearingPoint. What I'm going to present you today is just some areas that we found challenging when working for our clients. Especially for our clients, we developed an application for this client for the last year and almost a half. We're going to kickstart with an intro to tell you about this app, what it's doing, what integrations do we have with it. Then we move on to the backend setup to tell you more about the framework that we use on Node, which is Nest.js. Moving on to the authentication and users, in which I'm going to talk a little bit about single sign-on and why we have chosen to use it. Then about user provisioning and what challenge we had with this topic. Moving on to security, in which I'm going to present you what checks we have in the pipeline regarding security and vulnerabilities, and a simplified WASP, so some ways to spot in code reviews some of the WASP mistakes, let's say, or some of the mistakes that people are doing when deploying code, or things that you can avoid as a developer. And a bonus, for the front end, some testing for performance and accessibility using Lighthouse. So let's get going. For the intro, this is more simplified architecture of our application that we developed during the past year. In the front end, we have an app service that runs Angular with multiple components. And in the backend, we use also the app service from Azure, in which we have also inside the VNet, we have the Postgres database and also the application insights for logs. For our backend service, we use Nest.js, as I mentioned. I'm going to describe more in the next slide. And some of the integrations that we are having. So the backend is more of an aggregator for multiple services that our client is using and wanted to use them more in a unique space, which is this application. So we are integrating with Azure AD for authentication and fetching the users from the client's Active Directory. We are using Adobe Digital Asset Manager for assets, so more certainly videos and images. We are using Sprinkler for social media posts, Facebook and Instagram. We are using we have a module that acts as a product information management system, which deploys some GraphQL endpoints. And for that, we are using Solar and also another PIM from Adobe. And for documents, we are using both SharePoint and blob storage. Also for the emails, we are using SendGrid and the Google push notifications for the web push notifications. Maybe I should have also mentioned that the front end is actually never communicating with these services. We are the ones in the backend who are communicating with them, and the way we communicate with the front end is via JOT token that it's retrieved from Microsoft. As a backend setup, we have chosen to use Nest.js as a framework because it's very similar to Angular, and it's a very full and easy to use framework. It comes with all of the things that you would expect from in a framework, like ORM, dependency injection, middlewares, and a lot of support for other packages. Also events, interceptors, a full request flow, to say so, and also microservices support in case you want to migrate into a microservice space, which we are planning on doing maybe next year. And it's also a wrapper over Fastify and Express, so you can choose which server you want to use for your application. What we use on our local environment is Docker Compose, in which we have a container in which we run Node.js and our Nest application, another one for the Postgres database, another one for the adminer to have a data visualizer, another one for Solar. As I mentioned, we use this for the product information management system, and another Express app, which is also a Node container, of course, in which we are deploying mock endpoints that will mimic what we have for our integrators. So in this, we have just the most simplest Express endpoints that just return a 200 on every request, so that it's easier to test the business flows without using those sandboxes. As a more organizational part, to say so, I think it's very useful to implement when you are having these large enterprise applications and you are actually developing on a large period of time an architecture decision tracker. And I put an example here into a GitHub repository, which is very nicely made. So what this is you don't actually have to create a repository for your team. You can just store this inside your wiki. But it's very important to keep track of the major architecture decisions that come along the way, because like this, the most obvious benefit is for the newcomers, because they will have an overview of the project, an overview of the project's history, and it would be easier for them to onboard like this. So for instance, in our case, a major architectural decision was choosing SharePoint as a document management tool. And the reason, for this, the status would have been accepted. The context would have been that we need a tool to manage our documents, which would come with the permissions and rights out of the box. So hence, SharePoint had all of these capabilities, and we have chosen to move on using the SharePoint API. This was the decision, this was the context. And the consequences is that sometimes SharePoint permissions can be tricky, and we may have bugs along the way, and we may have to go to the Microsoft support to fix them. But we line up with those consequences, of course. Moving on to the authentication part, as I mentioned, we are using a single sign-on. As all of the users and all of the users that are using the application are in Active Directory, we are using Azure MSR Angular, so that the user is redirected to Microsoft in case it does not have a valid token in the cookies. Then the user, of course, if he or she is already authenticated, is going to be redirected back to our application. We're going to get the token, and then from there on, the front end communicates with the backend only via that token. In the backend, we use Passport Azure AD to validate the token, the signature, and also to extract the payload and the headers if necessary. And this is how the guard would look like on the right. This is how the guard would look like, and with that validate method, you're just injecting into your request information from the payload that you may need. And just like that, you resolved all of the sign-in, login issues inside your application. Some of the SSO advantages, and I'm very happy that our business pushed towards this, is reduced complexity for users. We actually had a lot of cases in which, after we implemented single sign-on for our application, the users came and they were just, hey, can you do the same with Adobe Campaign so that we are instantly logged in there once we are logged in into your app? And we're very flattered, but this does not come down to us, but it comes down to Adobe. This is just to underline how important it is to have single sign-on, because mostly in this enterprise space, a lot of users are using a lot of systems back and forth, and it's very inconvenient for them to memorize passwords and to have to log in on every single one of them. And also reduce complexity for developers, because you don't have to spend the time to think about all of this procedure, because you're just giving it to a third party, and you're just you have more time in the sprint to focus on what really matters, which is delivering business flows and business and quality for your client. And also more secure, because you don't have to handle it. Of course, you let a big company like Microsoft in this case, or any other, to handle it for you. On this part of user provisioning and why it is important, there's two approaches that we are currently using, and we are currently using them both. One would be so as I mentioned, in the backend, we receive the token from the front end that fetches it from Microsoft, and then we check into our database to see if we have the user. For the check, we are using the unique identifier from Microsoft that we have inside the tokens payload. If we don't have the user into our database, we go on into the Graph API and we fetch all the information about the user that we need. This is very simple. You just do this with the request. And then you store the user into the database, and you continue with the rest of your request. In the second approach, and it's an approach that helped us very much, because of course, as you can see, the first approach has limitations. The limitations are that, well, we are going to provision the users one by one, and this may not be what we need. The reason we need to fetch the users into our own database is because we need to give them certain roles and certain attributes that currently they are not present inside the Active Directory. So, and we also need to send them emails before they are onboarded, so that they are aware of the application, they can check it themselves. So the second approach was very useful. In terms, you just need to create an enterprise application inside the Active Directory. You go into the provisioning tab, and what this is doing, so Active Directory already, you are able to provision certain groups. You add the groups inside the service, and the Active Directory will actually check every change inside that group, whether it is a user has been added or a user has been deleted. And then every 40 minutes, this provisioning service is actually making a request into your backend app to give you the tracked activities. So if a user was added to the group, you get a post request. If another was changed, you get a patch or deleted, depending on what you want, and you configure what requests you want to receive inside your application. The disadvantages was that the documentation was not so well written. Sometimes there were a lack of logic things that we needed to implement this. So I advise it to test on your local with ngrok, and you're going to have much more easier time implementing it on your site. In terms of security, we are using Azure pipelines inside Azure DevOps, and these are the steps inside our CI pipeline that we use just in terms of security. So steps besides running the test, running the linter, publishing the coverage results. So only security here. One step would be the NPM audit, because it does not last so long. So as you can see, 2 seconds. You can also add it on Husky on a pre-commit push, so that you make sure that the packages that you are using inside your application do not have known vulnerabilities. Another would be the NCU, which would last approximately 3 seconds, in which you again do a second check on your packages to see if you have any updates that may be useful. Another one would be the SLS scans, or shiftless SAS scan, which is a static code analysis, which checks for things depending on how you configure it. So it's doing, for us, it is doing a dependency scan in Node.js, so another scan on the packages, but it's more on a more deeper level than what NPM audit is doing. a secret audit to make sure that we are not versioning any keys, any passwords, anything like that. Security audit for infrastructure. This is doing the checks on the Terraform scripts that we are using to provision the app services, the database, and a shell script analysis in case you have scripts inside your application. This lasts overall 2 minutes, and the last step would be a white source, which is again a non-blocking, which is doing also a checks on the packages, but also on the code itself. So it's looking for the common vulnerabilities and exposures, and it's also giving you the index and the link to read about them. And also it is suggesting fixes. And they also have a white source index, which is a similar database to common vulnerabilities and exposures. But I think it is related to white source. In terms of security and OWASP, these are just, I put some links in here with some really nice, let's say, games, so that you can remember these principles and you can apply them in your own code. I put here just a couple of examples that they can be, you can spot them during the code review process, and you should spot them in the code review process because they're very important. One would be mass assignments. So when you are making a request, to look inside the body and to not just merge like it is here, to not just merge what you get from the body with the user without checking it first. So let's say that a user that does not have admin rights wants to modify an attribute, so his or her username, and it's actually sending on the body is admin true. And this is an issue of mass assignment, because if you're not validating the body and you're just assigning to isAdmin true, if you have an isAdmin true into your database, that user is going to be making himself an admin, which is not what you want, of course, if the user does not have that right in the first place. Broken access control. In the broken access control, you're just making sure, this is very similar to mass assignment, you're just making sure that every route inside your API it's actually having the rights that it should do. And in SRS, it's very simple to implement this using interceptors. So we actually have interceptors for every major controller. So every controller with its own interceptor. So like that, even the get routes are protected. Another one would be sensitive data exposure. I think I've seen this with, because we are using ORMs right now, it's really important to make sure you're not eager true, so you're not fetching all the relationships inside the database and all the properties, just like that. Make sure to make it, to only fetch them if you want to and if you need to. So adding this eager false, so not fetching every relation, is very useful. To give you an example, in this space, let's say we have the user and we have this relation profile on the user. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We have this relation profile on the user, and let's say that this profile maybe has some really sensitive data on it. A developer, without knowing or without realizing, can just fetch the user information, and then, because if we would have eager true here, we would also fetch profile information without even realizing. Of course, you can catch this in the testing phase, but better to be aware of it before. Another security flaw would be in secure design, which you can avoid by just implementing logs inside your application, like how we have application insights. And also we use Azure Key Vault to store our environment variables, and not even developers have access to them to see them. Only we need to go to the infrastructure team to tell us what's inside there. And to finish everything, I refound this tool, which is Lighthouse, which is available in our Chrome browsers, and it's actually running audit tests on your front-end application, and gives very valuable insights on how you can improve your application in terms of performance, accessibility, search engine optimization, and best practices. It's not only useful for the front end. For instance, you can use it for, it can give you an insight that some responses are very slow. So then you can move on and look into the backend to see how you can improve stuff. The reason this is useful, and I'm going to tell you a story from our own experience during this approach. The clients, we are working on this application for the marketing team, and the marketing team is all over the world. So even in areas where the internet connection may not be that good. And we had a case with someone who just really had a bad internet connection. And what Lighthouse is doing, it is actually testing with a very slow internet connection, much more slower than you, because usually when we work, especially in Romania, we have very good internet connection. So we may not realize that our application is not loading the same for everyone. Yeah, so I highly advise it. It is very nice. They also have a node package, and you can integrate it inside your pipeline and also use it for reports using Puppeteer to do also end-to-end testing. So, and they're also going to release a new version, I think next year or next month even. So check it out if you haven't already. Thank you very much for listening. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea. We do have a question from Stefan Christian Pavel. Why did you choose Active Directory as an SSO provider? What were the advantages when compared with other options?
Yes, we chose Active Directory because all the infrastructure of our client was already in Active Directory. They had large infrastructure, so we had to sort of, because we couldn't change that and they didn't want that. So again, we wanted to keep them logged in on all the services that they are using, and the majority of them were using Active Directory as a provider.
Okay, and I have a question. You mentioned that you don't have access to any secrets. The infra team has them. What's the process in, okay, you made the backend and you have a Docker image. What's the process of actually putting it in production?
So the process is very manual. We just go to the infrastructure team and we tell them about the secret. To be honest, it's not that we don't have access. We don't have access that easily. We cannot write them at all. What we can do at most is we can go on dev and QA with SSH and we just read them from there. But besides that, it's just we go to them and we tell them what we need. We're not adding environment variables that often, so it's not such a burden for us.
Yeah, and for the code itself, do you send them a Docker image or do they do automatic deployments, continuous integrations? I don't know.
We are using Azure, so we're not using Docker on production or on local to set up our environment, and we have Azure pipelines, and like Azure pipeline script is just getting the code and sending it to app service.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If anyone else has any questions, we will look for them in the Facebook comments, so make sure you write them there. Andrei, you have...
It's my show. Okay, one second, let me share my screen. Okay.
Share us your problems or your mistakes or the team's mistakes.
Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yes,
Just to make
everything
sure. Okay,
looks perfect.
So, hi everybody, I'm Andrei. I'm Andrei Frasie. I'm a senior technology consultant on BearingPoint for like 6 years now. I started working on Microsoft technologies with .NET, ASP, MVC, and I worked on still on web development, and then I moved a bit to something on mobile using Xamarin, cross-platform, and that kind of stuff. And now back to the original, sometimes pain, sometimes a dream, web development, but in Node.js with Angular. And yeah, basically now I'm technically climbing up the ladder and trying to be a full-fledged architect. Let's see where the road will take me. Yep, so my part of the presentation, I will also speak about the Kickstarting. I have a different approach from what I've seen from my colleagues. I actually didn't really saw Andrea's and Flavia's presentation, so it was also new for me. I am going to start first with just like presenting the roadmap, as in what I'm going to talk about, the subjects, the topics. Then I'm going to take them in the second part and dive in each of them and try to bring some examples from what happened in my project, in past projects, or basically it's going to be kind of fully from my experience. And I really hope that even if I'm probably going to say some challenging stuff, some people will find my let's say learnings agreeable. And I'm going to end everything with just going through a set of learnings that are related or not related of what I'm going to present in the dive-in part. Okay, so now what exactly I'm going to talk about? Since I actually wanted to cover as many topics as possible and I couldn't really settle on some of them, I just created a full list, and together with some colleagues, I just asked, hey, what's more interesting for you for in this list? And then I wrapped up a few ideas, and I decided to go from the cloud perspective and to talk a bit about what resources you need when you start a big application and what to look at it actually when you start. Then from architecture side to answer this question, I liked how it sounds, so I wanted to present it. Maybe it's useful for others to know, like to decide who's the mule in the whole system. Then I am going to move and just bring up some things about the security and more like course and that kind of stuff. Uh, I don't want to present them because that's a bit boring. I just want to bring some of my findings and make some remarks that basically I found very late that caused some problems and so on. And then I would like to go and show some actual code because I'm still a programmer at the end of the day with some example. I named them their code habits and hints. And you can already see some stuff like duplication and hooks, but when we get to it. Before everything, so before I dive in, I just want to make again very clear that this is fully from my experience. So uh, I chose subjects that are basically pain points that happened to me or things that I found interesting or useful to know, and to try to present them as quick as possible in this talk, which is, by the way, actually the first outside of BearingPoint talk. So I'm quite nervous and eager to see how it goes. Yep, so it's going to be technical. So it's for developers. I'm using a lot of Azure stuff and Azure-based cloud infrastructure. So DevOps and all that stuff is there. So I'm going to have to bring examples from that area. And of course, corporate environment. So it might be that here and there I say something about things that are very business, let's say. Okay, so now taking the cloud view. So as you know, each cloud provider has like a huge collection of resources they can offer. So you can basically, you want to build an SPA, so a single page application. You can have app services, storage accounts, dedicated servers, or virtual machines that you do everything by yourself, a Docker image. I don't know. There's a lot of options. Not all of them good, not all of them appropriate for all the cases, maybe, and stuff like that. But there's a huge palette, so to help in every case. Now, what I want to say with this is basically that, for example, continuing with the SPA, if you research a bit and try to find out some stuff, so that it's actually changing quite often. But if you find out that you can use, like I said, this for SPAs, you can use the storage accounts to. Okay, I need to calm down because I'm rushing a bit. So when we think about an Angular SPA, simple example we also have on our project. When you start, you can find basically storage accounts which provide like some static storage, blob storage, and so on. App services, which are more like dynamic apps, and you can do much more than a static application would need. You can use, for example, in Asia, there's a specific um, dedicated service for Angular apps that you can use, and so on. And there's then Docker and all the other stuff. Now, from all of this, they have benefits and downsides. And of course, it's quite a big decision in the beginning. So let's say if for the Angular app, you choose the dedicated server, because it might be obvious, okay, I want a dedicated server that's made for Angular. Well, that one, it's good. It's maybe easy to start up, nice to show the business that you have progress quick, MVPs, proof of concepts, and whatever. But at some point, maybe you need to integrate another type of framework, or maybe you need to migrate a part of the application in that framework and you want to use the same server because it's still a static application and you can't, or stuff like that. So it kind of locks you on one direction and you can't really go back without actually taking time to do the migration. Then if you would do an app service, for example, that sounds good. You're more flexible. You're not locked onto something. But there are a lot of customizations that are possible. There's a lot of dependencies on how Azure works. On maybe, I don't know, since you're working on Angular, maybe you don't care on what operating system the app service works, or what version of Node it's there, or I don't know, other configurations. So that can become a burden. And also, just as a side note, from experience, app services are kind of weird sometimes. If you, on the startup phase, they have some weird functionalities when they boot up. So it's a bit of a mystery box. And now coming, for example, if you would use a storage account for the purpose of having literally static files, since it's an SPA, it makes 100% sense from my point of view. And it also provides like easy upload. It's integratable with pipelines and stuff like that. So if you would go for that one, you're, let's say, most flexible in the context of an SPA. So like I said here in the points that I present there, so we need to consider very well the purpose that we want to have. They have many capabilities, so it's not really obvious from the first glance that it's only that. So even the storage account has a lot of other things that it can do. If you think from the backend side, it's of course storage account doesn't make sense, but it's very important to know if you want to go into a monolith approach or microservice approach, or like a kind of distributed approach, because if there's any like hint that that will happen, for example, like I said, app services are good. They also are scalable and all that stuff, but they become a hassle and it's quite complicated when you think in microservice ways. So that's when maybe you should start looking into Docker or Docker like resources. Now, since I said that I want to give examples on our side, on the current project that I'm working on, we started with the app services because we wanted to start back and front end very quick. And it felt that this was a good decision. Now, it was a bit of misinformed decision looking now in hindsight, because for the front end side, we have a lot of extra burden. For example, we got the cloud team to actually we were the mediator between the security team and the cloud team to fix some of the configurations, so it kind of become our burden indirectly. Oh, actually, I forgot to mention one thing. So I'm trying to talk about things that are possibly also not developer needed. So you don't need a developer to do this stuff. You might need a cloud dev. But as a developer, you need to know what's happening there, and you probably are going to be put on the spot to make some decisions. Okay, now stepping a bit back to the example. So we went with app services front and backend, and now we have a bit of a hassle after like a year and a bit of development to move to storage accounts, for example, in front end, and on the backend to try to move to Docker. We don't have, it's not a complicated thing if you think of, but being in a business environment, you have a lot of approvals that you need. You need to talk to a lot of people to understand if there are the implications because you integrate with different systems and so on and so forth. Yeah, so cutting it short because I am talking way too much. This decision is very crucial, not in the moment when you start, but down the timeline, it's gonna really hurt if it's not well thought. Now, just a bit of a very specific example that we forgot because of this complexity and everything. So we thought that app services or whatever we would have used would have by itself some kind of caching. We found out that actually you need to integrate an actual CDN, so to create this resource and map it to the app services and stuff like that. And for the simple purpose of having like on the user's browser some caching, so use the local cache and all that stuff, we landed into the pickle of needing this CDN. So basically the moral of this slide would be just as from my mistake to consider caching if you're in a cloud environment because it helps. Like Andrea said before, not everybody has a good network. And 5, 6, 7 megabytes help quite a bit if you just take them off the request. And as I'm trying to say here in the slides, you don't need to overconfigure it. You can take it as it is. Just put it in the beginning and start developing. You can add rules and all the stuff over time, and it brings a lot of performance without actually doing too much. And it looks good for developers to have something like super optimal working. And just a bit of what you should cache there. What I said there is more or less everything in the beginning, except maybe in case of SPAs, the HTMLs. So you don't have, because it's not needed, the HTML will not have that much content. And everything else basically can be cached and altered over time if you see that there's a problem and stuff like that. Okay. I'm going to move now to the other part, which is the architecture and trying to answer the question, who's the mule? What do I mean by this question actually is quite funny. We had on the project, let's say newish colleague some time ago, and he actually asked me this question and I was quite, what do you mean? It's very simple. Who's the part of the system that's going to carry on the main of the business logic? It can be the backend, it can be the front end, it can be mixed, it can be a lot of ways. There's no correct way, but you need to make a decision as soon as possible and then try to stick to it. Of course, it's not like set in stone, but it makes sense to have a direction because it's going to influence, like I'm going to say in a bit, a lot of things. So if you take, for example, a backend oriented approach, then you have maybe all the logic there, nice. Simplified front end, again, super nice. With portable, so simplified and portable, and by portable I mean you can easily, in quotes, re-implement it on maybe now that I know Xamarin on mobile or on other stuff like that, and have it very quick available. Have your app available very quick on other mediums. But of course, it comes the downside that you would have complex API interfaces, and it's going to be hard to standardize according to REST or whatever are the standard. If you would choose the front end to do the heavy lifting, there's actually, from what I can think of, and I would solely state that you can't really do it 100%, because always the backend would need to validate what the front end does. for example, a calculation, if it's a assignment or something. So like, again, like Andrea presented before, the backend has to do some, if not all, this validation. But it leads to more or less simpler backend. It technically should be faster also, because you're delegating basically to the processor of the browser, mobile device, or whatever is running all the heavy load, so mappings or iterations through long lists and whatever. But like downside, it's redundant. It's your validation needs to be in two places. You can go around it with libraries, but still you need to have it in two places. And if you made the front end super complex, it's basically you keep it as you have it on, for example, Angular, and you stick to Angular. You can't really go and re-implement it. It's gonna take too much. And if you go with a mixed approach, it should squeeze like the most performance, since you're gonna put in the backend the queries that make sense for the backend, the ones that are optimized to work in the backend. In the front end, you put what's good for the front end. So I can think of things right now, but you can think about that. The downsides, and this is actually quite a nasty one in big teams, that more or less front-end developers and back-end developers need to know the whole business logic and the whole flow quite good, and it's quite hard to do that. Depends on the seniority, or actually the willingness of the team. I think seniority has nothing to do, but the willingness of everybody to try to keep up with everything that's happening. And still, it's going to be a complex front end, so not so easy portability. Yeah. So now moving from the architecture, I'm gonna try to very quick go through security measures. So there's a few of you that know all the, maybe not all. I don't think if somebody knows all of these methods, I really want to meet you and take you to a cup of coffee and please walk me through all of them in a more friendly way, not in the technical way. But for sure, some of you got hit by. Let me introduce CORS, ECSRF, XSS, or all these acronyms. And I just want basically to, from my experience, we should take them step by step, learn them gradually, add them in the application gradually. They might be supported by your browsers, not your browser, by frameworks or other libraries out of the box, or you might not even need to do anything about them because they might be in the scope of another team, which would be nice, delegating the work, but you need to learn them. But the main important thing that I really want to emphasize is that they are not actually security methods that are hardened, so very hard security measures. They have their limitations. They depend on some things. So, for example, having a legitimate browser. So, for example, only a trusted one, not I don't know, dark web stuff. And they are not on their own. So for example, if I take only CORS on its own, it does something very good, but it needs other mechanisms to ensure more and more and more layers of security. I put there a link. It's basically, while trying to read and prepare for this, I stumbled upon it, and it just explains more or less top level of quite a few of these mechanisms. And there you also can see that some of them are quite dependent on the environment and stuff like that. In the next slide, I want to take CORS and just explain a bit more in detail why, for example, this one is not really a hard security measure. So quick overview of CORS. Crossorigin resource sharing. It supposedly should take care that one site is not making a request to another domain that it's actually working on, or if it makes a request to another domain, to have it in a controlled way, so you don't have, I don't know, script injection or cookies stolen and stuff like that. Now, because of how all of this is set up, you need to send, the browser would need to send, for example, in the HTTP header, the domain of the site to the server, and the server will look at the domain and say, okay, I trust it. Oh, no, I don't trust it. And it's going to respond back. Basically, the whole load of decision will fall on the browser. And if that's why I say that it needs to be a legitimate one. So yeah, there's a lot of frameworks that also have course out of the box, and you can customize it and have it a bit more strict, but at the end of the day, it's not fully secured. Moving on now to some code stuff. So finally, some developer stuff. I thought of presenting some, let's say, not challenging, but like things that are brought up in my team when we introduce somebody new and they see the code and they are like, okay, this looks odd or this is interesting. The first one would be the duplication fear. Which basically, in our case, we duplicate quite a bit the DTOs, entities, models, and stuff like that. And I just want to basically bring forth my point that it's not that bad. I know that there's a lot of books, clean code, and everything that duplication is bad. Yes, it's bad if you do it in a method, if you do it in, I don't know, copy paste full classes and you don't make generic code. But if we think in some places it actually makes sense, and in DTOs and entities it makes, because of what I'm trying to say now. But I need first to explain the three classes that you see here. So there's the, in a weird order, but product without anything, so just the product. I hope you can see my pointer if I do like this. So the product, which is the entity, and it supposedly should hold only information about the database because it's we use TypeRM and it's generating the tables and all that stuff in the background. Then there is the DTO for requests. So when you try to create a product, for example, you fill in some stuff about it, and you should see validator information, which are these attributes, which is, for example, is number or a string and stuff like that. So validation stuff, and maybe some documentation for Swagger in our case, which just states, hey, if you use this DTO, you kind of want to fill in the ID, for example, something like this, or in the title, a string or whatever. And a separate one for the rest, so for the response, because sometimes, for example, you don't want to mix the logic when you have an API endpoint which returns part of the object. You don't want to have like weird null fields passed there, or when you try to clean up the code and you want to find a reference of something, you see that somewhere it's just set to null and you don't understand why. So it's good for them to be decoupled from my point of view. And yeah, feels a bit more cleaner, and it gives you a more granular understanding of what's happening. The purpose of that class is going to be much more easy to deduce. Of course, there will be more code to maintain, and of course, everybody that's new and comes with clean code in the background, they're going to have a lot of debates that this is good or bad, and I like it, I don't like it, but it needs to be a consensus. The next step is, and I actually like that Andrea talked a bit of hooks and pre-push and pre-commit hooks. So I was also thinking of encouraging everybody to use them. They're very useful. They reduce actually the time of, for example, Andrea said something like 2-3 minutes in the pipeline for white source, another 2-3 minutes for shift left scan, a few seconds for other stuff, but they all pile up. And basically, if you have an, I don't know, test issue, which would possibly run at the end of the pipeline, let's say, you're going to know only after 5 minutes or 10 minutes, depending on how complex your application is, that, oh, I screwed up. So would be much better to just put everything in a hook into a script and go from there. And basically, you kind of mimic the pipeline in a very simplified way. And also, you can do other things like control a bit what gets commit, not what gets committed, that everything is committed, because it happened quite a few times on a lot of times actually in the past time that I'm developing something, I'm saving the files, and then I'm making a git add, and then I remember, oh, I need to do something there. Then I take a break and come back and then just commit the part without adding the new small thing that I had to fix. Well, this one should kind of notify you, because when you do the git commit, actually git push in this case, the git push, hey, you have something there. Maybe you want to stash it or you want to do something with it. And on the pre-commit one, for example, what we use it for, since in Azure DevOps, if you append a commit with an hashtag and the ticket number, it does some automatic linking and stuff like that. We use it basically to append always from the branch name in all the commits the ID, and we don't need to bother to remember, oh, I'm working on ticket 100,344,212. You skip that annoying part. And yeah, Husky provides a good support for this. There's a few others, but we're using Husky because it's quite popular. I think it's the most popular, and by a big margin. So everybody can choose whatever they want, but I would suggest to use something. And then another, like, not a habit that I have, I just was thinking, okay, when you start a project, what else would be very interesting? You will for sure need to use a lot of tools, and you should use a lot of external libraries and tools to make your process faster and develop a bit faster. And I was thinking, okay, how can I help in this direction? Maybe just show you what I'm looking at when I'm choosing a package. So for example, here, quite recently, actually, we had to make just a transformation from JSON to XML. So I had to search for some XML parser. That's the first step that I do usually. Go Google XML, I don't know, npm, and I get a lot of them. I choose a few that look okay, and then start looking through these ones. So first thing that I look at, even though there's a lot of blue arrows around here, I look at the wiki downloads to be kind of used. I don't really have it as a hard check, but to be there, my hard check is to be have a publish date that, let's say, 3 months at most. So let's half a not every year quarter, basically, to have something new or fixes and stuff like that. Also to have like a version that's kind of high, so not, oh, it's the version 0.01 or something like that. So to be quite consistent. Then I go a bit on Git and on GitHub and try to see about the project itself. I look kind of to the contributors to see how many there are, if there are any, to just to get a feeling how popular it is to the starts. But the other thing that I look very, very in depth actually is the description, to have samples and stuff like that, or an actual wiki. That would be awesome. Or inside the code. Here the screenshots are not good, but in code, a lot of projects have these I don't know, samples, examples folder, to have one that has a lot of them. So that's another thing that I'm looking on quite a lot, like examples and documentation. And yeah, that's from this side. And as the next step, I'm using usually also white source when choosing. So I chose, I don't know, like which one did I set here? Fast XML parser. I'm going through white source, going through the pipeline basically like a test run and see if that one detects something weird in its dependencies. So I'm also trying to keep from security point of view a bit clean, to not forget about that one, to catch it before we actually start implementing with that library. So basically I'm just adding it to the package JSON and go through the pipeline and see, did it explode? No, okay, good. Also, colleagues are the ones that might have and usually have knowledge that I don't have. So I'm asking them, hey, maybe you know this package, have you worked with it? Did you work with something else and stuff like that? And if by any chance, like this guy is thinking here, if by any chance there's a bit of a conflict and or two good ones, I'm just using literally my feeling and looking a bit on the names and stuff like that to be simple and straightforward. Okay. Now, as the last part, if you remember from the beginning, I just want to present, there are 8 points. I'm just going to read them out. I know I took a lot of time and I'm sorry. uh, so these points that I consider very useful to know, I mean, have them in the back of your mind while you do your work. So the first one, and I think it's quite important, is when you start a project, think about the infrastructure and architecture, because there's down the line some decisions that you will need to make that might kill you, literally, not quite literally, but they will be very painful to deal with. So, like I was saying, with resources and stuff like that. When you think about security, add them gradually, don't add them all at the same time, and also add them alongside other features. Don't fall into the pit of listening to only to the business. I want feature, I want feature. You also have the duty to keep your code safe and your application safe. Have the third one, have your I don't know if you're using VS Code or whatever, set up well, as in have extensions, look for them, add hooks, set up a good linting, have it a bit more stricter maybe. Don't use the very default setup that, for example, VS Code provides. If you use a paid solution, you would need basically to align with the team to not have conflicts, but also that's a good way. Thinking about the code, there's be aware in the back of your mind it's a super small step in over engineering to fall into the over engineering, like I was talking about DTOs and stuff like that. That one can be taken to extreme, and you can really fall into some long discussions that are not productive, and you just lose time. Also, don't be afraid. For the fifth one, don't be afraid to turn around big decisions. If you catch them on time, if you catch them late, you're going to have a bit of trouble with that, but still try to turn the decision around if possible, if you know it's bad. As a developer, look around. Maybe while you, since there's big, the topic is big projects, there might be other developers working on things that are very similar to yours. So try to use their code and try to get together with them. Have a lot of communication. So 6 and 7s, they're kind of connected. And the last one, which is basically something funny because it's like a self-reflection of what I'm doing. Don't be a knowledge hoarder. Don't be the one that holds all the information or be the only one that knows a specific part of the application, because if you want to go on vacation, you're not going to have a vacation. Try to avoid that. It's quite good to have a sidekick or your whole team be knowledgeable with you. Yep, that's all from my side. It's was a bit of a marathon of information. I hope it was useful. As Flavia and Andrea said, here's my up there is my LinkedIn if you want to send me a message, question, or anything. Also the email. Thank you very much. And if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Andrei. Thank you for your presentation. It was quite indeed full of information.
Yes.
We don't have any questions, but usually that happens when there's too much information and
Yeah.
people can focus on what to ask. Thank you again for the presentation. If there are any more questions, we're gonna put them on the Talks by Softbinator group when we're gonna put the YouTube video up with the presentation. We're gonna share it, and if there are more questions, we're gonna tag you there. Thank you all for joining us tonight and for being with us. Thank you again to our speakers, Flavia, Andreea, Andrei, and thank you again for inBearingPoint Romania. And I guess see you all again next time in 2 weeks for our last edition for this week. And I think the next one will be a live one. And Doreen is joining to say something. Hello, Doreen, welcome. We're still live, so you can say
No,
this
no.
as well.
I just wanted to say to congratulate the speakers.
Okay, everyone, we're gonna stop the stream now, so see you again. Bye bye.